by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight, taking you through some ideas, maybe even forecasting out a little bit, looking at past cycles, how this might affect our lives together. We're all in it together. That's the thing. Have you noticed there's another X flare that just popped off the sun? I am saying absolutely the media is going to run with this like a scalded dog to say it's going to fry the power grids. It's going to take the internet down just to reinforce the predictive programming. Look, this X flare, it's going to hit on the 15th and 16th, but it's not going to be incredibly strange. It's not going to be all that. So let me adjust my microphone here for just a second. It seems like, yeah, we are back in on. See how this sounds now coming in? But at the same time, if you notice, there is now this is the second largest electrical manufacturer in the world for component parts. 20-week delay. So what is going on for engineered to order products? Like everywhere you look, there's something going on with the economy and products that we need for our lives and our machinery. And everywhere you look, it's another thing. The U.S. bonds aren't being accepted at port any longer as payment. So what do we have? A giant backup, and I'm going to go through some of the ports tonight again. This is week number 2. This is occurring, not week number 1. You know, we're looking at, Los Angeles and Long Beach Port, Vancouver Port, Oakland Port, Seattle, Tacoma, New York Port. The vessel dwell time, which means how long vessels stay there before they unload, is 0 days because there's 0 ships. These countries are not bringing things into the United States because they don't want our treasury bonds, and unless we're selling them or delivering oil or soybeans or ships full of goods back, they're just not sending anything. There's an embargo against the U.S. dollar, which starts with our treasury bonds. I was listening to Jim Willey, who I'll have on with me, hopefully next week, all about this. So, Ransom, I'm glad you're joining me. I'll take a look at the mic. It said it sounds fuzzy. Perhaps it's the beginning of the solar storm.
No, it sounds good now to me. Maybe it was an internet thing. I don't know. Yeah, I was looking at that flare, and I have to wonder because we talk about this a lot, and as far as protecting people, like say this a serious threat that it's not a fictional one. It's not like a fairy tale. It's something that could or will happen, or is going to eventually. The question is just when. And when you look at what the government does, i.e. like continuity of government, they are prepared for this. They have all kinds of ideas about what they're going to do if this happens. But none of it really, has anything to do with us up on the surface, us surface dwellers. So it's kind of like a time machine idea that they're trying to set up here. If just everything gets fried one day, they're going to go ahead and let it go because it plays into the reset idea that they already have. So even if some, X 30 or 45 or something even bigger than that, just starts wiping out grids across the earth, they're fine with that. They have all this continuity of government stuff. And what's funny is a lot of people don't know this, but the whole concept was started by the royal family, so that they wouldn't lose their wealth and that they would still be in power in case of any kind of emergency befell mankind. But then the United States took that idea up and ran with it, and then now a lot of people forget this, but if you read into continuity of government, it was only supposed to be initiated in case of a civilization failing event, right? And so it begs the question, why did they enact it on 9/11? So a lot of people are not even aware of this, but the continuity of government has been running. It's been running up the clock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, but it's been in motion since September 11th, 2001. And it wasn't a nuclear attack, what they said they were setting it up for. And now they've expanded their idea, of course, and they have it going now. So it makes you question a lot of things as far as governmental and what's been going on for the last 20 years. When you think, hey, they set up this continuity of government thing and then they enacted it, but never said anything about, turning it off or resetting that or, limiting its power once enacted. So that thing's been running, the idea of a backup continuity of government since September 11, 2001. So what has really been going on? And then, you read the idea behind the event, we'll call it the event, in the Project for a New American Century. So they were ready to go with this idea. They just needed this new Pearl Harbor that would kill about 3,000 people, according to their own ideas. They just needed this to happen. And thank God the same year they write about it, it happens within the next year. And then, they pop the top on their backup, breakaway, civilization, continuity of government. And if I'm not mistaken, Dick Cheney was the guy that was listed as running that at the time. So, who knows? And are those even, ideas that have information that we could even access? Are they considered state secrets? What has continuity of government been doing, since they enacted it? What's been going on? Who knows? But I do know that they've built DUMBs. We've all heard of the DUMBs, the deep underground military bases. And, the mutually assured destruction ideas as far as it goes for nuclear war. But they know, it's just like we do, that that's not the only event that can befall mankind and set us back to a Neolithic age at best. And when I say that, I really mean it, because if we were set back, I'm looking out there at the youth of the world, and I see millennials to Generation Z that will possibly be the people that live through the decades and eras of something if it happens soon. And that's a scary thought on its own, because, not to diss them too bad, but most of them are totally ignorant to any ideas that came from post 9/11 world, or a pre 9/11 world, a pre 9/11 world. Because if you think back to that, that was right before or right after everybody thought the world was going to be destroyed with the Y2K, and they got used to the idea of a simulated computer run world and that might fail, if the computers had a problem. So that was actually seemingly, like a beta idea for a mass CME or EMP from a rival nation. But any one of these number of things, we know that they have not backed up the infrastructure as far as it is for the American citizen. And I think the same probably applies to the other countries in the Western world. I'm not an expert on their infrastructure or anything, but I seriously doubt any of the other countries have put the billions of dollars that needed in there to back it up or have the parts ready to reassemble it in case one of our major grids goes down. So you're on your own if anything like that ever happens. And we're living in a world where the idea of that is increasingly happening. And not only a CME or a nuclear attack, now they're throwing, like, we've talked about many times over the summer, and I've mentioned that they were doing a predictive program campaign about hackers, about these, mysterious hackers that you could never, get a face on until, one day they just say, this is the guy that did it. And they show you a face on TV, and then they'll say, well, that's what happened. That's the guy that took down the North American power grid, or, something like that. Because they've been pushing that idea a lot lately. And matter of fact, didn't we have a big cyber attack the other day that they still don't know who they're going to blame it on, as far as I know, unless it's been updated, the story of that.
changing by the minute depending on the boogeyman. And, if they can't even recruit enough younger talent to come into the military because they're so obese, overweight, on drugs, psychological problems where they can't even staff our military to the basicest basic, then do you think this same crew or same crowd is actually going to rise up and do anything? Not a chance, man. I just don't see it happening. I mean, the same thing that's preventing from our military to be fully staffed is the same reason that there'll never be anything that goes on in the country, which, brings me to, I watched that movie, Leave the World Behind. I watched it, slowed down a couple parts, rewatched it a little bit. And the messaging is quite clear in that movie. There was a couple of different parts that I picked up on. The first one part, they had that strange squeak sound that came through, and, it was quite deafening. Now, in the beginning, I thought it was a rip or a tear in the electromagnetic field of the planet that was making that sound, because they talk about in the end days, you'll hear trumpets in the skies. Well, a rip or a tear in the electromagnetic field, that is going to create the same exact type of trumpet sounds and squeak and high pitched and deafening, types of sounds. People hear this hum across the earth, or sometimes they hear different foggy trumpets and, strange sounds emanating from the crust of the planet. I can attribute that to a weakening magnetosphere and a hole ripping in the magnetic field of the planet, although there's a very, very, very micro crack, slight. But imagine if it was a larger, like a real tear that was visible versus a micro crack. So that was one thing. And then, noticing how the GPS was malfunctioning, that would be another one that would go down with the magnetosphere not operating or not, being at its functional. Nothing would work on an orientation. So in the beginning of the movie, I was kind of looking at it from a grand solar minimum perspective of, are we losing the magnetic field? Was that the whole thing? Was it messing with the GPS and the echolocation of the animals? And, later on, they explained it was some sort of satellite microwave weapon. But the way, if you looked at it from just going in, originally my eyes were all on what is the programming that they're telling you about a natural cycle that is inbound to disrupt our systems of agriculture, commerce, government, and population migration, etc. But in the beginning, as they described this shrieks and shrills from the sky and ships running aground, I was like, damn, they're hitting it on the head of exactly what would happen if we get into electromagnetic disturbance event on the planet. Like, I think there was a dual layer message in that movie. And another thing that came at me was in one of the scenes near the end of the movie where they were talking,
You still there?
sat in the shot for near a minute. And this movie was produced in, I think 2023. So I'm looking at it going 1222. Why is it so big and so stark and right in front of the windshield as absolutely a signal that 1222 means something? And then the thing I got about the biggest message out of it was you got to have preps. You need to get prepped. And it wasn't a little prep either. It could have been a message of, okay, get some ready, get some cans of food ready or whatever. But the way they were signaling in that movie is you need enough food for 12 people for an entire year at the minimum. And you need to have regenerative agriculture where that whole wall they had a full wall full of microgreens and encapsulated aquariums growing indoor vertical agriculture, growing greens on probably like 100-foot long wall, 5 levels deep. Giving like 500 square feet of grow space inside that. In addition, that was already auto timed to go on with LED lights and things. Even though nobody was there, it was on an auto timer to run. So for me, the messaging was quite clear. Whatever is coming, and I do believe that they were overlaying and interlacing natural cycles inside that. That something's going to be happening with the electromagnetic field of the planet. It absolutely is going to knock out communications, including satellites. And that you need to get prepped up, not a little bit, but I'm talking big, like you got to go Hiroshima style big on this one, super big. because, then they had those nuclear explosions inside the New York City, and you saw the second one go, boom, and you could see the shockwave come off. And it was just, how many people are really ready for that? Like, the younger generation is not going to be prepared. Mentally is the whole thing. It was about a mental game too, because the way the characters were weaving in, nobody trusted anybody, and it was all the biases coming back from everybody inside. The programming, however old or young they were, the mind frame of it, because then at the end you could see them sort of getting ready, like their minds were changing into, oh no, this thing's for real, this thing's a long-lasting thing, and now what? How are we going to handle it? I wish there was a part 2 to watch their psychosis snap or break. I was just wondering, would they work together? Would they fight each other? Would it be the last man standing for the rest of the resources? How long would it take before somebody got on like a rowboat and came out there off the island and then walked in and found their place? Or the military came in and found their place? The symbolism was stark in that movie. Yeah, it dragged in a lot of parts, and it was but the thing about the animals too, the animals are always affected by electromagnetic field changes. They had a scene where there was birds that were flocking. The flamingos were in the wrong place. The flamingos landed near New York City in the swimming pool. Definitely electromagnetic field change. Now, so you could have microwave weapon satellite technologies all day long, but they put that flamingos were up in a swimming pool from Florida in New York. That for sure is absolutely electromagnetic field shifting. Then the crows and the birds were in the wrong places, or there seemed to be quite a disorderly amount of the birds in a single area as well. And then all the deers all kind of came into one spot. It's like they were almost attracted to the center of a ley line or something, intersection of a ley line, like they were drawn electrically to a place. If they never would have said in that movie that it was microwave weaponry that was making the sounds, if they would have left that bit out, I exclusively would have thought it was all the electromagnetic tears and discombobulation and shifting of the north-south orientation in a polar wander that is beyond a polar wander into borderline pole shifting. Now, that's the messaging I got from that movie, was something's here. And the way the Obamas put that movie together, if you couldn't see, it was a stark warning to the world that you all need to get ready. That's about the best way I can describe it. Is at the end of it, sitting there watching that massive stockpile of food in the basement there. That was just, something to behold. But is anybody going to be ready for this change? Because I want to come back to the story for a second. And here's another one that's going to disrupt us. Now, there's disruptions happening already, absolutely, in the supply chains. And this one's getting ready to really rock our world here. Now, the amount of companies that buy from this Schneider Electric is nearly 90% of all companies on the planet that have any electronics in them buy from this company. I'll say that again. 90% of companies in the world that manufacture electronics buy componentry from Schneider Electric. And now they're on a 20-week delay for products into Q1 end of next year. So whether it's private or public infrastructure or power grids or manufacturing lines or whatever it would be, what is taking them down right now suddenly? You went from a stocked world into, we got a 20-week delay on the world's one of the second largest manufacturer of electrical components. Like, something doesn't add up here. What is the reason that they are suddenly down? They're not able to answer any questions. None of their teams knew this was happening before it was announced today. So they sent out this letter that said, oh, well, our upstream supply is stabilizing. The order intake has exceeded industry expectations in material availability. Now, wait a second. We have a decreasing economy across the planet. People are not buying as much. Christmas sales, at least through the Western world as we know it, are down some 20% year on year from the last year. But they're saying that it's exceeding industry expectations for the amount of goods being bought, and material availability is another one, which means the same thing I keep hearing with the ports not accepting, like the ships that are coming in from other countries' destination to be paid with treasury bonds on unloading that were instantaneously convertible to something else. They're not accepting those treasury bonds anymore. So the material availability, we're coming into like rare earths and everything else that is in the metals and semiconductor supply chain. Global raw materials like resins, plastics, specialty metals, like it all suddenly stopped right now on a dime at the same time across the planet. See, that's what they're saying to everybody here in their letter. We want to manufacture for you, but there's a complete global lockup of everything we need to bring into the house to create the product for you. It is completely locked up, and the earliest we can get you anything is 20 weeks from now. We are sorry. Now, reading this, I'm like, holy smokes, what's going on out there? Persistent supply chain challenges. There are no customized solutions. There's a high demand and persistent supply that cannot be met. Now, where is the breakdown? How did this just suddenly happen today and yesterday? And suddenly they come out with all this? I'm really, I'm looking at this more of a plan thing. They do mention geopolitical tensions, but that's really very, like small in comparison to what they're going to be importing from other nations abroad. So as you look at all these little tiny pieces, whether it be this movie, Leave the World Behind, or whether it be this complete shutdown of electronics supply chains across the world in real time, like now, any engineered to order product ceases to be produced from today. So, Ransom, you got a pretty good grasp on these types of things. Like, where does this take us in the world then? If, let's say, 90% of the global manufacturing of electronics can't get what they need for even componentry parts, then almost every supply, or I should say every manufacturing line across the world stops. And then what does that do? Then follow the daisy chain back for me. Like, what kind of lockup are we looking at?
It'd be like, they might need all of those specific things, like all of the rare earth elements, metals, etc. How should I put it? Somebody's got dibs on that stuff right now for the near future. I mean, because that's all the stuff that would be running all the wars here. And it seems like, they and I mean, when I say they, I know that's so kind of corny these days, because who is they? It's the super global elite technocratic people that have so much money, so much power, so much wealth and sway that they are not upholden to any government of the world, and they themselves believe that they are world governance. And I could throw out names, but everybody knows the names. But it's like we're living in this bizarre they already have a name for it. I mean, I've been playing everybody the Jill Biden Christmas video, and it's like, they're just bragging to us, to our face, that we're about to start living in the Hunger Games. When you're talking about distribution and business and all of these things, people are like, well, I don't care about that, particular sector of economy or that one. But people don't understand that it's intertwined together so tightly that when one market crashes, another market crashes, another market crashes. And what we're seeing right now is a worldwide crash of production of any kind, really. I mean, what are they making? And now all the companies are, backing off and basically admitting that there's no way that they could deliver the world electric cars. So there goes that, made up dream that they've made everybody live with. And then, they've done all of these subsidies, made laws, restrictions, shut down roads, set up these weird power stations that, by the way, if there was a grid down scenario, you think waiting a day and a half to charge your car up's bad. What about not being able to charge it up at all? Well, everybody with a working backed up parts for their older vehicle is going to put, a new solenoid, a new battery, and some stuff that they had, a computer, one of the older, motherboards that were in the old stuff. It's I don't even know if you can call it that. It's more like a basic circuit board that all of the old cars had, that runs the basic mechanics of the car. You just pop that into your car and you are running. You had all that in a Faraday cage. So it's a matter of twisting some bolts. And then, you got to think about all of these avenues of the sectors of these economies that you're talking about, different ones: finance, manufacturing, mining and stripping, and then the value up and down. And I'm sure you saw that gold just kind of started going up in value, which obviously means that our money is going to decrease in value, because those are almost like a 1-in-1 correlation. The more dollars that it takes to get an ounce of gold, that your dollars are even more worthless than they were yesterday. And that seems to be happening. And then when you look all across everywhere, I'm just seeing the most bizarre things that have ever come across news headlines, and that is captivating and capturing, I'm going to say, like, the majority of goldfish. And then in the background, you see all of these deals going down. And remember, last year I said, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see the nations of the world pick sides for the upcoming global conflict. And they're not only doing it for the BRICS versus dollar alignments, but they're also doing it in this way. So here's an article right here. Germany warns of waning Western support for Ukraine. They're crying. They're doing that over here. We just gave them more billions of dollars to fight an enemy that nobody in the U.S. picked. And really, other than them saying so, I don't see that they're any danger to the U.S. if we weren't building bases and nuclear capabilities along their borders. But they're going to have this conflict. And I don't even think it has anything at this point to do with national conflicts at the national level, like this nation has a problem with this nation, so therefore they're going to do this or that to go to war. The global governance has decided that this is the era in which we decrease population. And anybody that's arguing that that is not ongoing has lost their minds and have no logical skills whatsoever. So every conflict around the world is upticking, and we know that we're about to have it, like I called it over here in the Americas, right down with Venezuela wanting to invade their neighbor, and the U.S. saying we're going to do something about that too. So you could look forward to that. But in the background of all of that, up here on our own border, we have propaganda going wild. And I'm sure you've seen some of the trailers for some of these new Obama flicks that are out. One of them's about a civil war that happens in America. And if you've been even watching television or any kind of show at all for the last, I'm going to say 15 years now, you've known that they villainize anybody that says the words Constitution or my rights, and they'll try to associate them with some kind of far-right white supremacist movement in these shows. And that's typically the bad guy that they've been picking for all shows and movies recently is some kind of weird, guy that's super racist and likes his Bible and his guns, and he's just crazy for liking his constitutional rights. And they've been trying to portray that, and now they're pushing openly, like basically with the movies, predictive programming that there's no way around the differences that the different states have and the different groups of political factions that are both, zombified in a uniparty that eventually does the same thing. And if I don't understand why anybody that claims to be a Republican or a Democrat right now just ask themselves, you know what? What does the majority of both sides vote for when it comes to any particular war or cause? And just look, and you can see which ones all vote for it. And they'll tell you to your face it's for America. But as far as I know, conflicts around the world, don't benefit us at all. And in fact, like Ron Paul said, they only create blowback. But that's not the narrative they're trying to send over here. They want to destabilize us first. And in order to do that, they have to disarm us. So in order to do that, they have to come up with new laws that contradict the ones and the lifestyle and the fundamental foundations of human rights, individual rights, and liberty that were, for the first time uttered out here and then put on paper, and then supposedly having a government that backs those ideas. So now they're sending propaganda out that we are so indifferent to each other that there must be some kind of civil war. And then we get back to these think tanks, the ones that predicted, quote unquote, 9/11. And they've been writing about this for years, how that they wanted a race war to get going. We needed some kind of civil war. So, the federal government can take even more, I'm going to say, dissecting of the constitutional rights that we enjoy in this country, or we're supposed to. And the propaganda is on full tilt. So when people start to get hungry and these other things because of supply chain issues, they're going to get increasingly more irritated, and they know that. And that's why, when they pump propaganda, they do it at specific times of the year. If you've ever noticed, whenever they push the idea for riots and things like that in cities, it's usually hot. It's usually the summertime, or it's cold, super cold, where it's like they want people in an agitated state, and then they go ahead and give them divisive things. And tell everybody, and then you just see, mixed in there with, oh, by the way, we're going to go to war here, we're going to go to war there, we're going to go to war over here, we're going to fund these guys, we're going to give these guys bombs, and we're going to give these guys a bunch of depleted uranium to shoot up everywhere in one of the best wheat fields in Europe. Not only, you get these crazy ones. Grandmother murdered, needs money for burial because the police found some naked man just atop of his headless mom in Jersey. And it's like, well, that's a one-off. But I just been seeing more and more and more of these really far outlandish, crazy town incidences that people are having in the supposed, civilized world. And I think it's a direct result of not only the pharmacopoeia, so to speak, of the population, but this constant I'm going to go ahead and say MK Ultra style programming through the news headlines and the uniparty system of division, of tribalism. And they want everybody so, taken up with that they don't realize that the markets are shrinking, that when you go to the store, the shelves are shorter. They have less products there. The hours are shorter. The mom and pop's alternate choices are gone. All of this has happened in the free world. And it's like, people, because it happened incrementally over like a 5-year period, they're not noticing that happened. And funny enough, when they just spent all these billions in this new NDAA or whatever it was bill they passed, it allows the back door to spying, just like the original scandal with Edward Snowden and the entire thing. So verifying what I've been telling you constantly, meaning the audience, that every keystroke you do, every text message, every movement in front of these smart TVs, monitors, and devices, that little robot is the inside informant in your house. And most people have probably 5 to 10 of them going at any given time. And I'm talking about tablets, phones, and then secondary devices like MP3 players that are smart, and almost all of this is created overseas with backup redundancy programs to use the devices against you. It's a real bizarre world that we're living in. It's a super state of spying, but plus there's espionage and intellectual property theft rampant from, big techs will just take any idea. And you can see that in the case of China, and other countries let it go because I think they've already picked a winner in this next theater of war or theatrical play, which I believe is what World War II was.
Yeah, if I could talk about food for a second. Does everybody know tacos? And you know what a cat is? So if you spell taco cat spelled backward is taco cat. I got to lighten the mood up here. It's so crazy, the world we're living in. Think of a taco cat spelled backwards. It's still taco cat. Every time the world gets too rough for you, you have to interject a sliver of humor in there. And also, speaking of interjecting, please remember our show notes for the ideas that Ransom and I are talking about this evening. We try to put this out in a bullet point, 10 bullet points, and just a single one-pager. If you go to oilseedcrops.org, and in the nav bar up there, you'll see MIAC radio show. If you click on that, you can come down, enter your email address, and we'll send you out the show notes probably tomorrow. And again, that's oil, like one barrel of oil, seed, like one seed that you plant in the ground, and crops, CROPS, plural, like we harvest crops every year. .org, MIC radio show. Now, speaking of vilifying things, anybody who might have a rifle or, goes hunting and all these types of things, what are the possibilities that there's a global shortage of gunpowder? Can you believe that at the exact same time that this is going on? So if you decided that you wanted to get ready and your light bulb goes off in your head and like, whoa, maybe there is a problem. But at this point, you're a little too late on any kind of ammo. And then also at the same time, when I was talking about, the shortages that are inbound for what appears to be electronics across the planet, I looked up the critical minerals list here by the Department of Energy for the United States, and I'll read them to you. Aluminum, cobalt, copper, dysprosium, electrical steel, fluorine, gallium, iridium, lithium, molybdenum, magnesium, neodymium, natural graphite, nickel, platinum, what's that, parasidium, I don't know that one, silicon carbide, and terbium. What I don't see there is silver. But the scuttlebutt on the street is they're in there rating some of the highest quality silver. They call it white silver. Right now, our government is taking control over the stockpiles of what they call white silver. It's an extra refined. It's about the reflectivity index in it. In ultra processed, you're talking about 6 nines, or even up to 9 nines fine, in terms of the silver refining. And because of the reflectivity properties of it, now they're just going to be classifying that as a critical mineral. So, where is it? Gold's not on the list. Silver's falling sort of between the cracks, depending on how reflective it is. And where does this get? Is it going to be a critical mineral, and then suddenly, you're not allowed to own silver, although any silver stackers out there that are privy to that. So if you were able to get silver or gold, great. If you have any ammo, awesome. If you don't get it, it's about to triple in price. I've seen some lowball figures from 25% increases to the highest that I've seen is a 3x or 300% increase. So unanimously across the spectrum of suppliers, the prices are going to go up anywhere from 20% to 300%. And there's been so far Federal, Winchester, and there's 2 more that supply only our military now under military contract under the Manufacturing Act. They're no longer going to sell out to civilians. So, things that you might find over at, I don't know, where you go and there's some ammo laying around behind a case somewhere, that's going to start drying up as well. So you're looking at two drying events happening at the same time for that. So as we look across the landscape, how do you protect yourself financially if they're going to be confiscating silver now, in addition to gold, if they do such a thing again? You can only see our economy is going to be heading toward a hyperinflative print here. And, I've been listening to Jim Willey quite a bit as of late. And again, like I said, I've reached out to him to try to get him on the show. Jim, if you get the email, please, love to have you on my show. The way he's explaining it is the reason that these ships are sitting in our ports empty, or there are no ships now, is the way before it was done. When a ship would unload, they would be issued treasury bonds in lieu of the cargo. for that delivery of the value for that ship from the FOB or the freight on board manifests within that, paid on delivery. And then there would be, I don't know, you could choose a 1 year, 3 year, 10 year, 30 year, whatever. And then those who would want to take it quickly would get like the 1 year, and they would revert it over and they would switch it into something else. That is not even wanted anymore. And why is that, is more the question. Well, it looks like we are going to have to print $7.5 trillion here by June of 2024 in the next 6 months. And you look at that for a second, you're like, wait a minute, that's more than $1 trillion a month. Like what, how is that even possible? We have to, by the 23rd of this month, December 23rd, we have to pay the interest, which is almost $1 trillion on the bonds that are out in the world right now. Plus we have to fund, which means we need to sell treasury bonds to fund through, remember that emergency spending ceiling limit. They're back at it again. So they have to then fund $3 trillion for that. And then as we get into the first half of next year, they need an additional $4 trillion. And they are not going to default. The Fed is going to print. There will be no default. There will not be. They're going to monetize what they call monetize the debt, which means we're just going to print the money and buy back our own treasury bonds or treasury bills, T-bills, however you like to term that. So think about the conundrum of that. How fast do you think prices will start rising? Because it comes right back into whether we had the money or not, or whether that company was still manufacturing electronic goods. If it was coming to the United States, unless there was payment for that already invoked in some clause or contract, that's not getting, nothing's moving. So I'll read you the list here. We will start. Now at the peak of COVID, for example, the average, I'm not saying the high, the average during the peak of COVID, the average was 80 container ships at anchor off of Long Beach and 80 average off of Los Angeles. And what do we have today? 0. So the way they frame this, if you're not looking and familiar with vessels coming in, dwell time is how long they're waiting out to actually berth somewhere to unload. Average waiting days, 0. There are no ships. Berthing upon arrival conditions and vessels at anchor right now, 0. We go to Vancouver Port. Vessel dwell time, how long are they hanging around? 0 days. Vessels at anchor, 0. Now this, I would have said, okay, well, that's kind of weird, those two. Oakland Port. Vessel dwell time averaging 0 days. Vessels at anchor, 0. And I'm like, no, that's impossible. That's really literally impossible on the West Coast. So I need to go down a little further. Seattle Tacoma Port. Vessel dwell time averaging 0 days. Vessels at anchor, 0. And I'm like, no, that's completely impossible. New York Port. Vessel dwell time, okay. It's 0 to 1 days. Vessels at anchor waiting to come in to unload, 0. Now, we're down in Norfolk now, and I'm like, wait, Norfolk, all right, they got it. It's Norfolk military, Navy base, etc. Averaging dwell time, 0 days. They don't give you, they have a non-available or NA for how many ships are waiting at anchor. Charleston Port is the only one that I see so far that I've read off this list that has even any ships. Vessel dwell time, 1 day. Right now at anchor, 3. Savannah Port, 1 at anchor. Miami Port, dwell time, 0 days. Vessels at anchor, 0. I'm really shocked when I see this. And then Houston, God, oil. There has to be something there, right? Average dwell time, 0 days. Vessels at anchor, 0. 0. This is all the major ports I just ran through in the United States. How many of those had 0 waiting? 0 at anchor, 0 at berth. Like, what is going on? And then they have the inverse of China. So we'll go to Shanghai port. There's 46 or 45 vessels at anchor waiting to unload. Ningbo port, 21 vessels at anchor. Qingdao, 8 vessels. Busan, again, this is a weird one. Busan, which is in Korea, South Korea, they're at 0 vessels at anchor and 0 waiting days. Again, they have no ships there. Xiamen port, they have 1 vessel at anchor. And Shenzhen, which is one of the major export, anything, and if you go down like the Pearl River Delta, you're talking about massive manufacturing, Guangdong area, Ningbo, that whole area. Huge furniture manufacturing, auto manufacturing, electronics manufacturing, anything that's manufactured pretty much in a zone is down in the Pearl River Delta down there. Shenzhen is going to be your loading port. There are 0 vessels waiting to load. I don't know what's going on, but Ransom, this makes no sense to me. I'm just looking at this and then putting it into perspective with what Jim Willey's been saying about they're no longer accepting treasury bills for payment. Then we have a huge problem because the price of gold is going to be a direct reflection, but apparently that gold price was smashed back down on purpose. But you can't tell me that gold rose some, $150 in a matter of 2 days and something's not wrong in the hinterlands. It just doesn't make sense. And, I would just like your opinion. If indeed we're going to have to find $7.5 trillion over the next 6 months, like how much do you think our product's food is going to cost when we start printing that much extra money here in the United States?
It's everything that you see going on around the world is going to show up at the prices at Walmart or, like wherever you shop. And it's becoming increasingly obvious that something large scale, I mean, think about it. You go from what we were talking about, the different sectors of economics, just kind of having weird things going on about who's going to get what. And then you see the mass shipping apparatus of the world. It moves pretty much like clockwork, minus any superstorms or something like that they have to avoid, or natural disasters. So all of a sudden to see some weird action going on around the world, I mean, it's pretty obvious in places like the Red Sea or things like that near combat zones that we're going to increasingly have issues of shipping, getting things places. And it looks like with the soon to be war down in Venezuela and Guyana, that Panama might, you were already talking about issues that we're having there. Think about when that's now a no-go zone for shipping for commercial boats to try to go through there, because there's actual combat war and piracy going on. And as well as I do that it got famous in the 90s, all of the pirating that was going on off the coast of Africa there, and it never stopped. Matter of fact, it's increased over time, right? And now you have all of this other stuff going on, and it makes you wonder. They have everyone set up perfectly right now to just turn everything off. I mean, worldwide, at least the people that depend on the actual infrastructures, especially people that don't have property of any kind. Because, we talk about prepping. There are people that don't even own anything. They don't own a car. They don't own a place to live. They don't have nothing. They rent a place. They walk. They're part of the end result that they've always wanted for this concept of massive super cities with the 15-minute city, where you're sectioned off in your little district there, and you're not really supposed to be wandering around too far. And in fact, you can't, because you're on foot or on bicycle or in an auto car. And now we're seeing that there's problems with this network. So what they're going to do is, start attacking the infrastructure. I mean, you think about that, when and if something happened that put our grid down or something like that, or even all of the supply chains, local government, et cetera, people start paying less taxes, and you start having, times like depression starts to go around, and people are in need of work and things like that. Now they're bragging now that there's all this work, but I just don't see it. I don't see it as any real jobs that make things, that make money. that would be saving us. And then you look over here around the world, and what they're telling you, like in the news headlines, is obviously wrong. Here's an article right here, and tell me what you see is wrong with this, because they say in this country, I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm not going to mention the country, but there's a certain Mediterranean country that got attacked recently, and now they're going into a war. And they said they were blindsided by it, and they just didn't see it coming and stuff. And then when you look into it just a little bit, you find out, wow, these guys have one of the best surveillance apparatuses in the entire world, not only through human intelligence and classic intelligence style human intelligence gathering, but they also have one of the most advanced AI systems. And now, just a short time later, they're basically bragging that they're using this AI system, in which I've also brought up in the past before this conflict started. Automatic guns, we're talking, jets soon to be on the playing field that no one's flying. But Israel is, I said it. But anyway, they're using AI. They're bragging about it. So this is an NPR mainstream article talking about them using AI systems to find the targets in their combat zone. And experts say that's just the start, which I also say that. So that also tells you, something else was going on. And then the idea that America would have a civil war with the government involved somehow is preposterous. If anybody was going to go up against the apparatus of surveillance state, and we're just talking about the ones that the public knows about, the military policing is like the fourth biggest military in the world here in the U.S. They have a massive spy network and apparatus. Now, I give you, if we have a grid down scenario, they're going to break out their redundancy continuity of government stuff, and that doesn't include locals. So it's a nightmare waiting to happen. But I think they're trying to push us into that, and they're going to weaken us first, because you don't just, do it all of a sudden. You have to slowly roll it out and tell people with the universal law that you're about to do it to them. And this is exactly what we see going on. Everybody talking about, I saw this article where they're actually going, if I can find it, exactly like we joked about last year, that soon they're going to just say that basically us breathing is destroying the world. Just humans out there moving around, whether you're eating meat or not eating meat, just you breathing is bad for the environment. And if they can get, a couple more generations on this concept of fictional tales from the science realm to what's actually happening on the ground, because they have the internet cordoned off like no other time. Since the internet has sprung out, and they had it kind of in the free market where people had all the startups. You remember the dot-com boom, and now it's just an echo chamber of censorship, and you can't even find out real information. Now, I realize that Elon Musk is offering supposed free speech and the opposite on the coin. But need I remind you guys, he is intertwined with the Defense Department. Some of the ideas that he's pushing forward are exactly these technocratic ideas that everybody should be worried about: policing and robots, a robot in the house, automatic driving cars. He's in bed with them as far as the surveillance state. I mean, they're in cahoots as far as providing the entire world with internet. And as you and I know, the internet is a two-way street, in which if you can get the internet, then the internet can see you and everything about you. And as I've explained in the past, all of these devices that we buy and bring home with our disposable income are nothing more than a mass surveillance system that is interlocking and works together in tandem. So your phone is verifying your home, your television is verifying your home, your computer, etc., all of your tablets, your children's tablets, and they are just sucking up the information, and which they will deploy after the reset happens, whenever they use psychological programs to control the way the next couple generations do their thing. Now, I was showing everybody an article about, in Florida, how the age range of 60 and plus are having a great time, and they're doing their thing, and they're having big parties with each other, and using pharmaceuticals to have a good time. And, that kind of points to where we're at in the evolution of society. The children of the great generation, kind of the elders of our time now, that are the oldest generation, the boomers now, are not what you would expect the elder range of people to be. It's nothing like the World War II generation or the silent generation before them or any other era. These guys are just like, whatever, and I hope it burns down, and we're going to spend all the money that our parents made, and who cares? You guys can have it.
Burning the world down. Well, party to the end, man. On the Titanic, what would you do? They understand that the money, they better spend it now while they can still spend it and enjoy it, because just around the corner might be some surprises. We'll be back to talk about that after the break here. Mini Ice Age Conversations. David DuByne with Ransom Godwin. We'll be right back.
During times of both prosperity and disparity, through the rise and fall of great dynasties and civilizations, gold has maintained its purchasing power as a reliable store of value for millennia. Gold has been used as money since 560 BC, when King Croesus of Lydia created a gold coin in his own image. Ever since, it has continued to increase its long-term value and remains the world's most universally accepted form of money. Today, the demand for gold continues to flourish globally. History proves that fiat paper money is designed to go to zero through inflation, whereas gold has intrinsic value in which it maintains forever. Paper money is a debt instrument. Gold is an asset of wealth in its own right. It does not depend upon any governments, corporations, or individuals' promise to repay. ITM Trading has spent the last 27 plus years developing a team of expert researchers and analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn or currency collapse. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422. Or go to learn.itmtrading.com/MIAC and keep watching Mountain High Time and Mini Ice Age Conversations if you know what's good for you.
Norman Rockwell's Freedom from Want painting depicts one of the most peaceful scenes in American life as a family gathers around a holiday dinner table to give thanks, eat, talk, laugh, and share in an abundance of blessings. While this great American tradition will play out in the coming weeks, a hunger catastrophe is unfolding around the world, putting even the simplest of meals out of reach for a growing number of individuals and families around the world. Right now, nearly 1/3 of the world is food insecure, with over 828 million people going to bed hungry each night. 149 million children experience stunted growth and development due to a chronic lack of essential nutrients. As many as 50 million people in 45 countries are at immediate risk of famine, and more than 45 million children suffer from acute malnutrition or wasting, a devastating condition where a child's body is so starved of nutrients it begins to consume itself. These numbers are staggering, and behind every one of them is a real person. More than 44 million people in the U.S. face hunger, including 1 in 5 children. Millions of people in the U.S. don't have enough food to eat or don't have access to healthy food. This is a big problem, but together we can solve it. Although it isn't always obvious who is going without food or facing food insecurity, it might be your friend, your grandparents, or a coworker who is struggling to put food on the table. It could be a neighbor, the friendly elderly couple down the street. Maybe it's a single dad or mom who might need help. We all have tough times. That's why investing in emergency food storage is a must for you and your family's long-term safety net, but it can also be a life-saving gift. So in this giving season, you could help others by providing a helping hand to those in need of a little extra to make it through. As we always say, those who know what's coming are using today to prepare. American families are preparing. Folks are investing in emergency food storage. And you should be too, and you can start today with ADAPT 2030. Right now you can save $200 on a 3-month emergency food supply for yourself, or even better, for someone in need. Make this holiday season truly a happy one. My Patriot Supply, the country's largest preparedness company, is more than equipped to stock your shelves. Their best-selling 3-month emergency food kit provides delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners that last up to 25 years in storage. That's 25 years of security. Just think about that. Almost nothing out there other than gold and guns that will maintain not only value but usefulness and security. And right now, it's $200 off. Get over 2,000 calories every day. Just add water and heat, then eat. Make sure every member of your family has a 3-month food kit from My Patriot Supply.
What's the byproduct? Water vapor. So you got to stop flaring because you're going to create water vapor. Okay. You know, they gripe about methane going up into the atmosphere. Okay, so the oil companies are pretty much taking care of their methane problem by burning it and turning it into water vapor, but now they're saying, whoa, well, you can't vent that. You're creating too much water vapor going up. Like, what? You can't have it both ways. You either want to stop the methane or you want to stop water vapor. Like, you know, now it's in this conundrum of just silly science where, you know, somehow this, oh, you're burning the methane off. It's creating water vapor. You're such a bad person. Okay, next. You know, you look at all this. And, you know, one thing Ransom was talking about food, and so was I in the first hour. A thing I was working on earlier today was the prices that the French farmers have been paid in their sales to supermarkets across France. And there's a huge amount of riots going on. If you take a look at what is happening with them, you can understand why they're so angry right now. You know, they're getting 57 euro cents per kilogram for apples, but then the store is selling it for, you know, almost €6 per kilogram. So they get a 9 times or a 9x increase markup, you know, from what they're paying the farmers. And the farmer's like, well, you're charging that much money. You got to be able to kick us some back here. And then eggs, 6 eggs are 57 euro cents, but then the supermarket will sell it for $2.67, or €2.67, excuse me. That's nearly a 5x increase. And the potatoes is nearly a 6.5 times increase. So they buy it for 40 cents, and then they sell it for $2.60. And then organic milk as well, it's 90 cents a liter, and then they're selling it for $4.55 a liter. That's a 500% or a 5 times increase in price. And the farmer's like, we're going to charge you more. You need to pay us more money. This is like price gouging. And now the farmers do not want to sell to the supermarkets any longer. So this puts, you know, Europe into a conundrum of the first farmer boycott of food to the country. So who do you blame for something like that? Do you blame the politicians? Do you blame the farmers? Because you watch the media, they're going to flag it as the farmers are withholding all the food. They're the bad people. That's why your prices are so expensive. Like, how do you think the Bolshevik Revolution and the whole Holodomor over in Ukraine got started? Well, the wheat farmers became incredibly wealthy because they bought new machinery that increased their wheat production for anywhere from a 3 times to a 5 times increase in output. And with that much of extra available grain, they were able to sell to export markets and become incredibly wealthy. But that was only one portion of the country that was in the wheat growing region. And then the rest of the country was poor. And then suddenly, you know, you can't have this poor and rich mix. You got to vilify them. And then if you look at the whole Holodomor chapter, where I think, you know, around 10 million people perished during that time, you'll see that food's always been used as a weapon. So here we are now, square in France. The farmers are going to start not planting on purpose to starve their own country, which is crazy. They're going to grow enough for themselves in their own little regions, but they're going to stop selling to the supermarkets. And then, you know, like these giants, Carrefour, they're going to come in with their politicians and legislation and police and come in and make the farmers grow the food because they're not going to be able to, exist without the farmers feeding them the supply. So my question to start off the hour is, do you think it's fair that a farmer would withhold selling to supermarkets, or would that be a good idea? So what if every farmer in America stopped selling eggs, chicken, beef, milk, cheese, any types of corn, sweet corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes? They just said, okay, you know what? None of the farmers are selling to any of the supermarkets any longer. And you know what? We're not going to sell to the factories that supply the supermarkets any longer either. So if you want to buy 200 tons of potato, they're going to get turned into potato chips and put on a shelf somewhere in an IGA or a Food Lion or whatever else you might think of, a Whole Foods or anything. You know what? We're not going to sell to you anymore. We're only going to keep it local for local folks. And you know what? We might take a hit this year on the revenue, but you know what? Outside of your GMO garbage, there's going to be very little produce coming in for you, because there's a lot more small stakeholder farmers in France than there are in the U.S., because everything is like gigantic corporation like Monsanto, et cetera. All the factory farms and everything are pretty much corporate controlled. But in Europe, it's a different animal altogether. They're very small farms and farmhold, like a 500-acre farm. That's a behemoth, like unbelievably large. Like, whoa, 500 acres. Wow. That's in Europe. But 500 acres, you're like, that's too small. We're going to have to tear down the house so we don't have to turn the tractor. That's the kind of mentality here when they buy old farms, or like, tear down the house so we don't have to turn the tractor as much. So, could there be a food embargo? Could the farmers actually turn the tables on these giant corporate behemoths and force them, by starving the people and limiting food choices, to force the people, to force the government to then change the policies toward the farmer and taxes? I don't know, man. That's a dangerous, ballsy play that they're trying, but I'm wondering if it'll work.
That scenario that you were talking about in the French Revolution, because people have been listening to us over the years, and we've been talking about, this happening, that happening, and the market's changing and the prices going up. And I think everybody's waiting for this one day they just wake up and there's a doomsday event. Now, short of space weather, volcanoes, etc., and that's all mostly, except for the space weather, would be localized events, right? And we've been seeing those around the world. So, like in local areas, I was just showing the article there talking about people in the Gaza eating donkey and begging for bread and stuff. And they weren't doing that long ago. And you could look through history at any time some event actually happened. And it does kind of happen overnight, as far as when, troops start moving around and shots start getting fired. Now, as far as in the U.S., I don't think that that's ever really going to happen until something like a scenario like you were talking about, the exporters, exporting and becoming rich, and then people getting mad, and the whole French Revolution thing. Now, what if, the government continues down its path of socialism and cripples the markets of U.S. food producers, like mostly everywhere? What's going to happen is a lot of people in remote locations are going to feel it. People in the cities, not so much, because they have priorities with the shipping, et cetera. So if you don't live in a state like Texas that has, basically most of its own food production in-house, they have HEB in like Texas, Texas company. So that their state would keep producing. Now, what happens if some of the other states that have gone more in the handout instead of hand up direction, as far as government doling out of resources, not helping people make money and farm and things like that? Instead, they're going in the other direction of handout and universal income and food assistance, which that number of people increases all the time. And it's an exponential number. So eventually the number of people that are not working and doing this thing are going to outnumber the workers and the producers. And then you have a big conundrum going on. And some of those states might get angry that, like Texas might stop shipping, which they don't really ship that far out anyway. It's mostly an in-house thing for HEB, like any Texas town that's got a lot of people, you usually have one of those, and they have better food, and they have local food, and they have food that's grown there, right? So like over in New Mexico, I live in a small town, and although there's agriculture all around me, the products are not being sold to us. And I found this amazing when I was in Maryland. I went shopping, off the Air Force Base, and then I found an organic store, and inside that store were aisles of products from New Mexico, like all kinds of organic stuff that farmers were growing, from nuts to grains, et cetera, et cetera. And it blew my mind because those are things I had never seen in my local markets living in New Mexico my entire life. So, they have this weird system, even in the U.S., where the products that are local are being shipped somewhere else. And the whole thing is like a mush board, if you will, all tangled up of where products go. And then you would have to have some kind of issue if there was any real emergency on a national level where food started tightening. I think exactly you would see that. So maybe these predictive programmings about civil war might not happen for the reasons they put in there, but it is very possible that areas might decide to be very hostile towards another area because they actually grow the food, produce the food, live on the land where the food is being grown, versus millions of people that are just hungry but don't actually make anything or produce anything, that live in these massive science experiments, basically. And those are the portions of the planet that they try to feed you the ideas like global warming is super hot. We took a measurement today. It was the hottest ever since we've been recording it. We happened to take it on an airport and on a bunch of asphalt next to a bunch of, vehicles and thrusts of jet engines and stuff like that. But don't worry about that. We could have took that measurement off in a nice cool field somewhere with a breeze blowing from lots of plants and stuff, but they don't do that. So when they talk about the population is too much for the planet, they will always show you the city, and they'll never show you the vast expanses of possible food production zones that are all over the planet.
Yeah, and I might add in the USDA has just updated their hardiness zone for plants, or the plant hardiness zone map. And what they did was they moved everything half of a zone northward. Staying in with that, it's getting warmer, so your crops will grow more in the north. But we find that here, at least in Tennessee, to be the opposite, where the late freezes come in it's happened 2 years in a row. We're extremely late, way into April, and it dropped down to 22 degrees or something in late April, just for 1 or 2 days, in the evenings only. But all those blooms and blossoms that had already popped out for the fruit trees, gone, all of them. And this year was onset really early for the freezes, got down to 20 degrees Fahrenheit a month ago in the evening. It's been frosting continuously, day after day after day. It's been in 22, 23 degree Fahrenheit in the evenings for just days in a row now. These are the temperatures you might get late January, for a spate where you might get, a few really chilly nights. But the temperatures are running well below 10 degrees below what they would normally be in the evenings this time of the year. And I guess it's totally selective of where it would be. But the plant hardiness zone, I really feel they're doing a disservice to Americans who are just beginning to grow. See, I look at this in a very what is happening, why this year? Because the awareness of the food prices, people are going to start growing their own food. They're going to raise their own gardens. They're going to get started in agriculture somehow, whether it be a raised bed garden, a little herb garden, growing some corn, whatever. It was my first year growing tobacco this year. I put out about 20 plants. I had some decent success. I had some terrible, things happen. Hornworms, all kinds. I learned a lot about spacing, location, pest control, harvesting, drying, curing, all this stuff. I don't smoke. I'm not a smoker, but I'm using that for a natural pesticide. I take the leaves and, put them in water, boiling water, leave it sit there for a few days in the sun, strain it out. Man, that is some seriously powerful pesticide. But it is in the nicotinoid family, so I try to keep it away from the bees if at all possible. But the thing I'm saying, I've been gardening, growing stuff for years. I understand having row cover ready to cover plants in case there's a strange frost coming after the gardens are up and running in the springtime. But a lot of people are going to take that new map to heart, and they're going to plant way early, thinking they're getting a jumping head start. And, oh, this is growing food super easy. Look how easy everything just kind of comes up. And then wham, they get hit with the frost. I personally think it's a disservice to put that out. They should actually be bringing the crop zones further south in the cold side of things. So my 7A, or now what is, coming into 6, should be pulled back to what Virginia temperatures would be versus Georgia temperatures. Like the new map is showing here, so we're just in the middle between Virginia and Georgia. But the new map shows that we're going to be getting Georgia hot weather as our new climate zone, where in reality, I think it's going to be trending more toward like Virginia cooler weather. So I think that the crop maps should be switching and pushing further south, like Virginia weather should be pushed down to where we sit. And perhaps we'll be in 7B instead of 7A, instead of 6. They're splitting the zones into A's and B's, which they never really did too much before. But the whole thing is, for me, it's a psychological thing for the new grower who doesn't know about crops, doesn't know about planting and harvesting dates, doesn't know anything. All they're going to do is look at that map and buy some seeds and hopefully get a garden started when they're spooked about the food prices. But for the USDA to put that's sloppy, dangerous, and, kowtowing to a narrative. Then they shouldn't be readjusting. The last time they did the map was 2012. Are you telling me there's that much change since 2012 to now? 10 years, and they're redoing an entire map? That for sure is agenda driven. That science is not behind that. How could they map out every single location with a guarantee that it's gotten warmer and the moisture patterns have changed in the last 10 years of every square meter of every grow zone in the United States? Pretty much they'd have to do one every square mile. And I know for sure we don't have that many temperature stations around. So for them to redo the map just literally 10 years later to make it appear that everything's getting so much warmer that we're going to be able to grow like, something up in Canada that would grow in Florida like next week is ridiculous. We can grow palm trees in Canada because of these things happening. Look, the hardiness zone map changed. It said we can grow palm trees now in Canada. I mean, this is the kind of just fanciful print that they're moving to. And I was trying to mention before we went on the break also, we are trying to get out our show notes right now for the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast radio show. So if you want to sign up for our show notes, make sure you head over to oilseedcrops.org. And in the browser bar at the top there, the navigation bar, you'll see MIAC radio show. Just click on that, enter your email. Ransom and I will get you some show notes. It's usually like 10 bullet points of things we spoke about tonight. And one of those for sure that's on my list to guarantee that's going to be on this is talking about the hardiness zone map and including the 2012 map and the newest 2023 release map, both. Because I think it's super important that people see the change. Like they put Puerto Rico down in equatorial belt temperatures now. I mean, Puerto Rico, it's warm, it's tropical, it's in the Caribbean. But to move it from what would be, like 20 degrees north latitude temperatures to equatorial temperatures in a single 10-year period, that's a little stretch for me. A little bit of too much of a jump there. You understand it's warm and tropical, but you're taking it from, like I say, 20 north to 0 on the equator. That's insane. Like, how do you 20 degrees of latitude suddenly shifts? I mean, that's impossible, literally impossible. So that's one of the show notes, for example, so you can start a conversation with others and say, hey, did you hear about this? I can't believe they switching the grow zones around on the maps. Why would they do it so quickly after they published one 10 years ago? So if you want to join us again there, that's oilseedcrops.org. Mini Ice Age Conversations radio show right there in the nav bar. And Ransom, before I let you throw back for another comment, I have a story here for you. Greedflation. This comes off The Guardian. Greedflation, corporate profiteering significantly boosted global prices. Multinationals are windfall record profits so far above the cost of living and the increase or the quote unquote inflation rate that people are starting to ask some questions now. Their profits rose, get this, 30% this year. 30% based on increasing the food price for us out here in the world to buy. So how long will it take now that it's in the news and there's some senators and a few Congress people out there asking, saying, wait a second, how is all of our food prices from the corporates rising 30% and the inflation rate supposed to be, what, 10% or something? And how is the American consumer and the European consumer getting gouged by this greedflation? Yeah, companies, they're corporate. Okay, they need to make a profit. I get it. They're providing you a service by keeping you a steady flow of goods into the stores. But at some point, it becomes profiteering. And at that point, you know, what do you call it? Racketeering? I mean, will they ever call it what it truly is? This is truly theft. So I know I spoke a bit there, Rance. I'll leave it back to you.
They're still claiming, you know, at least over in the U.S., we got the Bidenomics. According to them, things are better than they ever have been. And despite your lying eyes at the supermarket, you know, and people have told me, hey, none of that stuff you told me has happened. I mean, there's plenty of food, man. And I'm like, well, I didn't say that, you know, it was all overnight going to disappear. What I said is incrementally they're going to raise the prices until people are wondering what's going on. And now we're at that point. If it gets any worse, then you start seeing angry people, right? Because they get angry that their style of disposable income has come to an end. And I don't know what a lot of people are going to do. I mean, you know, there's normal people out there. There's farmers. There's, you know, country people. There's people in the city that don't even, you know, aren't into things. You know, like one time I saw a friend I hadn't seen in a long time, and I asked him, I forget what it was, you know, something about Twitter. He was like, you know, I don't tweet, I don't tube, I don't none of that. He don't even carry a phone with him. He's still living like it's in the 90s. And you know what? That seems kind of funny, but there may come a time soon when you might want to live that way too, because any chance of the U.S. retaining any sovereignty and getting out of the nightmare of socialist and basically world governance and Marxist ideas. And, you know, I challenge anyone to point to that country that Marxism worked out, and you know, their whole society's wonderful and beautiful and all of that stuff. It didn't happen. It's not going to happen. It will never happen. And neither will the communist ideas. They work for a while, as long as, you know, you keep the population in line, as we see in China. And by the way, they just declared all the GPS data that's coming out of China, I guess, as far as their government staff, everybody else, it's all a state secret now. Because they don't want outside eyes knowing what's going on. And then here in the United States, we have Congress approves bill barring any future president from unilaterally withdrawing us from NATO. And, you know, there was a big to-do when Trump was acting like we might leave NATO because they don't actually pay. It's the American tax burden that, you know, bears the brunt of it for all the taxpayers here. People here pay for that, and a lot of people here don't understand what Ukraine has to do with here. Well, it's this. That's our branch. That's our tentacles into the rest of the world there. So I don't know. You know, and as far as American people, they're really going to keep their nose in the screen, like I said, until their bellies are empty. And I've said this for a long time. As long as there's, you know, 100 cable channels and 31 flavors of ice cream, people probably won't freak out about anything going on. And you know, when you look across the world and you see earthquakes, et cetera, war, people eating donkeys. You remember in Venezuela, they were eating the zoo animals. So it's hard for me to work around that. You have all of these millions of oblivious people not realizing that things can, you know, turn on a dime like they have in the past. And then they won't be saying, well, you know, people told me this might happen someday, but I just never really thought it would happen. And I don't think it has to happen. And the world governance, like I've said many times, has a real problem with the U.S. because there still is a community of farmers and agricultural based culture in the U.S. And a lot of people did know their papa, mima, grandpa, grandma, all of the different names for it, depending on where you live, that taught them how to use tools, and they remember it. And I think that, at least as far as Generation X and up, everybody should know how to use tools and et cetera. So as long as they're alive, there is hope for, this kind of firewall against this world governance taking control here and causing mass poverty and et cetera. But it's not no thanks to the, the governance that we deal with that's supposed to be national and representing the people. They keep doing these deals where that no matter what happens, we have to deal with it. That's when localization meets the globalization, as they say in business. This is exactly that. The price of rice, the price of food, et cetera, will increase when your government continues to give away the majority of the taxes that you pay in for their little pet projects of world governance, and at the same time, continue to create money out of thin air and make the money that's out there worth less and less. And everyone knows that's how it works. It's just a matter of when that planned bubble is going to pop. I mean, I'm a big fan of Ron Paul, and I bet people could say, hey, the financial market it's never collapsed, but it's come near it several times, hasn't it? So just like the Great Depression, it could be overnight where you see people partying to the next night jumping out of buildings because their entire life savings that's tied up in the market or whatever's going on, it just goes to zero. Just a few years back, you remember all the poor people that were invested in Enron.
Enron. Too big to fail, weren't they? Oh, wait, that was corporate scandal with accounting. Oh, wait, nobody ever went to jail for that, did they? How many billions were walked away with? Red-handed theft. And because they had better lawyers, who actually really spent hard time in a prison for that? None of them. They went to their little country club jails for a minute and got out on the weekend or some garbage like this. And how many of these too big to fails? Lehman Brothers as well. Another one.
I don't want to discredit you with like a conspiracy theory, but did you ever believe that the other scandal there with the guy named Madoff? I mean, come on. That sounds like made up for TV. The guy that stole the money, Bernie Madoff. He made off with the money. You know what I mean? It seems so fake because we knew that all of the government was stealing money and these corporations were insider trading with the government. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, I thought that was so funny that they just, this guy happens to be named Madoff.
And he made off with all the money. Speaking of corporate profits and greedflation, it does seem like this thing, like we've all been waiting for this one single event to roll out and be the shoe to drop, and then suddenly we know it's all time to get ready, and the old world would have stopped, and we're into a new type of thinking and behaving. Would it be for survival? It would eventually end in maybe 5 to 6 months, and something would reemerge out of that. And it's just you kind of have to get through that tumultuous time intact, hence having enough food, water, provisions, security, medicines, etc. for 6 months. If somebody gets hurt, and they're not going to, lose their hand because they got a cut on their finger trying to build something. It seems like it's a continuous angst, continuous unnerving type of knowing it's happening, but it didn't happen yet, but it could. And it's been drawing on like this since the beginning of 2022? Like you thought with the stock market, it would have collapsed by now. The currencies would have evaporated because everything's going to come back to the U.S. dollar because it's all the base of every monetary system on the planet. Everything's based off the U.S. dollar. So the dollar is going to be the last strongest one standing, but it'll be such a devalued last withering shadow of itself, but all the money will come back. The dollar index, dollar's going to get super strong first before it collapses. And there's going to be just continuous selling, and we're going to have to reabsorb that money. slowly, continuously, just like this continuous, oh, it's going to happen, it's going to continue to happen. Now, the thing I can point at is, Ransom, I sent you all those charts about the commodity prices. The thing we can forecast off of, and I've had many a conversation, when I try to do a presentation talking about something in a 2,000-year cycle or a 400-year cycle, they're like, all right, we get it in the 400-year cycle, but things are very different now. We can give you to 1850 and forward, and anything that's occurred in the 1850 to now time frame will be a reference on how high prices could go. Because if we do look back into, say, the 1400s, the price of rye went 20 times higher, and the price of wheat went to, something like 40 times higher in England for a minute there. Like, those are extreme cases, and they were so far back, and the circumstances for such a thing was really rare. And would it happen again? Not sure. They have some unusual pricing around 535 AD, where the mintage of coins had ceased for, several years. And obviously, because your coinage ceases being minted, it means there was a huge problem. So there was a problem with food pricing as well. So I'm just staying from 1850 until current. So we can kind of forecast, if you were going to, of where a maximum price might take us. So knowing that the inflation's inbound and how much money America needs to print to fund itself, the government's going to have to completely shut down, and Social Security will completely stop if we don't print the money here. Now, there's too many older people that are going to get pissed and do have a lot of political clout and are not afraid to stand up, that it would rock the boat. If you turn off the Social Security to everybody recipients right now, there would be a flood of people my parents' age out on the street in like day number 2 that would not go home and would not take no for an answer, and have vast networks of friends and, business leaders and community leaders. Because that when you're getting that old, you're already deep into the system and you've known everybody forever. And there's a lot of, the Rolodex is deep, let's say. Like a kid who's 20 years old, they don't really care about. They don't have that much networking power. They have very little capital wealth. They aren't able to organize movements or anything. They'll be part of a movement or an organization, but they don't have the wealth, the ability, or the Rolodex depth to actually start something. You start messing with people who are 60 and over by the millions, tens of millions, there's going to be a huge problem, like, immediately. So they're not going to stop any kind of, disbursements for Social Security. They're just going to print the money to keep going, so there will not be a default. They're going to print the next trillion so we can do our interest due payments here. It's actually 900 billion, which is coming up here on the 23rd. And then that rollover emergency thing. And it's just going to keep rolling and rolling. And we're going to keep printing into next year as well to try to fund the government. So let's start to take a look at some of the prices. Like, how high could it get with all this money printing going is kind of where I'm laying the groundwork for it. So if we look at the price of beef, back in, say, 1975, compared to today, so we're going to use benchmarks. So today's benchmark is around 200. In 1975, the highest prices for beef were 500. So if we're looking at a 2.5 times increase in your beef prices. So if there's a nice juicy steak that you like and it's $10, would you pay $25 for the same steak? The realm of possibility of your beef prices going up 2.5 times is well within the precedent back in just into the 1970s. That's not very far back in time. And then there was a drop, and then it popped right back up to 400 on the index. So that would be a doubling of where we sit today. So, 200 to 400, would that be? Now, let's look at grain prices. So the price of rice, the highest price for rice that we have is in 1850 and then also 1975. And our index today sits around 20. But in 1975 or so, it was around 130. So again, the price of your rice could go up 6 times higher. Are you prepared for that? In the historical precedent, in the near very near past, within the last, say, 50 to 70 years, it's gone up. It would be 6 times higher price. Now, the corn, the highest prices they ever had was during World War I, and say 1915 to 1925 or so. The index we sit at today is around 30, and the price of corn on their index was around 310. So that, the corn price back then would be approximately 10 times higher than today. So any products made of corn obviously would rise in price. But today's corn is mainly for ethanol and animal feed, which brings me back. Are you ready to pay double for your beef? Are you ready to pay 3 to 6 times more for your rice? And these are questions that you need to ask yourself. What would you give up if you couldn't? You're only gonna have a limited amount of money, including myself. Like, what would I buy with it? What would I trade for it? So if we look at wheat prices and rye prices, they actually really are very close together since 1900 or 1890. They're like brother and sister marching along the same line, pretty much exactly the same price. If we look at the wheat or the rye indices right now, it's looking probably around, let's say, 40. But in the high prices, again, World War I, the thing went to about 220. So you're looking at about, a 5 times increase? So if your loaf of bread was $3, would you pay $15 for a loaf of bread? Now, I'll reel it in because I understand World War I, the supply chains weren't as robust and advanced and mature as they are today. So I'll bring you back to 1970. The index looks like it went up to about, 120. We'll call it 120. And we sit at 40 today. So let's say a 3x increase. So your loaf of bread costs $3 today. I like to get pumpernickel, and it costs me $3.50 actually for a loaf. But would I spend 3 times that amount? Would I spend $10 on a loaf of bread? Or would I learn how to go to the store and buy a 50-pound bag of flour and cook it and bake it myself? Obviously, the latter would be, because a 50-pound bag of wheat at that point today, I don't know how much it would cost. Well, it depends on which store you're at. But that would also rise in price, but not nearly enough as much as the finished product. So I wouldn't be spending $10 a loaf if I was baking it myself. It would be probably closer to $1.50 a loaf doing it myself with a 50-pound bag of flour in my house. Now, here's the last one I'll just say about this, coffee. Now, a lot of people like coffee, including myself, and it would be a tradable, a barterable in any grid down situation. Even a freeze-dried crappy cup would be good for anybody. I'll take that. In a moment's notice, if I haven't had coffee for weeks and you offer me a cup of freeze-dried, thank you, my friend. What would you like for trade? So if we look at the index where we sit today with coffee, it's around 50. The highest prices in the 1970s took that to around 325. So if we go 50, 1, 2, 3, 4, about a 5 times increase in your coffee price. So you walk your butt down over to the Costco and you're spending $12 on a 5-pound tin of coffee. Would you spend $25 for that same tin of coffee? Is the question. Because I am only explaining that in the near past, these prices could easily reach that price again, or a portion of that upward into that price range of doubling, tripling. If it was going up 5x, then a doubling or a tripling you'd be happy with because it didn't go 5x. But if your coffee is $12, would you still spend $36 on the same? Because you're only going to have a limited amount of money. And, Ransom, I sent you those charts, and hopefully you're able to put those up because I was looking at the chart, not looking at our live feed on Rumble. Thank you for joining us, or the Mini Ice Age Conversation YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us over there as well. So, Ransom, how much money do you think there will be, and how expensive prices will they get comparatively to the 1970s historical highs? And what are the first things that people are going to stop buying to make ends meet? And no pun intended on the meat.
Right. I really don't know what other people do, because when I go to their houses, and throughout the years, I've seen what other people put in their houses, and it's like a totally different world from what I grew up in, or what I was, taught to buy or cook or whatever. You go to their house and they have a lot of the freezer bags full of stuff and boxes and boxes of GMO grains and treats, candies, snack foods, crackers, et cetera, et cetera. Which, I mean, obviously in a pinch, those are all something that you could trade and eat and, stuff. But when I go to the store and we like to eat meat, because I don't eat pork, and it's not for religious reasons. It's just because, I don't need the additives that sometimes come with certain products. And I'm kind of the same way with chicken. If it's not organic chicken, I'm just not eating it. I can't do it. I don't like the idea of it. And I don't want to get sick from it. So you get limited to organic beef or lamb or sometimes bison, at least where I live. That's what we get through if we're going to get anything. And I'm willing myself to pay at least $10 for a little chunk of meat, because I know that little chunk of meat will give me nutrition. And if I eat one of those little chunks of meat every couple of days, I'm good. I'm healthy, and I'm going to be all right, especially with vegetables that you might be growing or not. So like this year, didn't do great on the vegetable intake, but I got a lot of fruit. So like it's cold outside. We're coming into January, and I have literally bunches of these big watermelons. So we have fresh fruit for the winter. Which is great. So if you were just growing stuff like that every year, and people realize that the prices are just going up, and the only answer is to at least substitute some of the stuff that you're trying to buy. Like, have you ever seen a price of like one of those little trays of chopped watermelon, and God knows, where the watermelon came from, how old it's been sitting in there, all of that stuff. People are willing to pay a lot for those little tiny snacks inside the city. Like, I grew up wanting to eat the whole watermelon. You know what I mean? Like, it was a cheap thing. I just went out in the field, grabbed one, and I'm still trying to do that now. I think people have to go back to the lessons of the past about growing, and it's the only real competition and firewall against what they're trying to do, this global system that they're trying to enact and trying to make people from the Western world pay for, and then also house an additional, et cetera, amount of millions of people on top of that with conflicting ideas of how to live and how to have freedom. So everything is going to have to come to a head, and there's so many different destabilization programs out there. The only real answer is to recognize them and form a core of, I'm going to say American, and they don't have to be American. I'm not saying it in that way. I mean, just people that want to live with the land, with the earth, produce instead of consume. I mean, I know that sounds ironic because we're producing so we can consume, but not just be a nation of only consumers. And that's exactly what we've been trained to do. And I like Christmas, and so does the next guy. And this year, people are going to spend, probably all the money they should be putting back for their future on disposable items that they don't really need or want, that are probably going to end up in a closet in a couple of months. And I get it, especially if you have kids, you want them to have memories, so you buy them a bunch of that kind of stuff. But you need to be doing Christmas shopping for yourself. And what I mean by that is buying tools to accomplish things like I just had to change the power steering pump on a car, and I got it done in a couple of hours. And I realized, part of the process, I needed a vise to hold it still so I could get the pulley, the wheel off of it. But I had to create a whole thing with the stuff I had at home to create a something to hold it down so that I could do that job easily. And it just reminded me that no matter how many tools I have, you need more tools to accomplish things by yourself. And if there's any kind of shutdown, mechanics will probably be fine. But what happens when the government says, hey, you can't do that? And you see these programs right now starting, like there's I don't know how much you know about the auto collision industry, but For a long time, you could go to any auction, and matter of fact, there's a good one in Tennessee. It's a IIAA or something like that. It's a auto insurance auction where you can go buy almost brand new cars that have, slight flood damage or a little fender bender or whatever, and the insurance company totaled the vehicle, and so they don't want to pay for it, but it's not actually broke, and you can just buy it for really cheap, buy a couple $100 worth of parts, and you have what should be a normal car that you've repaired and that you should be able to sell or use or do whatever. But the states have got involved and made it where everything's salvage. And they're starting to have laws where you can't drive salvage cars on the road. And that's going to increasingly happen when they take over. And you can see they do have plans for automation, but it's not the kind of George Jetson flying car freedom that we were promised since the, 50s at least, the flying cars and all that. Instead, it's going to be a mass transit system. And you're going to have to pay heavily taxed, fees and things to drive your own automobiles or use your own farming equipment because, it destroys the planet. Plus, now they're just pushing, like I said, the absurd idea, which I told you was going to come, which is another prediction come true on this channel or on this show, right? That they are going to push the agenda that breathing is bad, and now you have to have your carbon footprint and your digital carbon credit system has to be individual on you, along with your social credit score that keeps track of that, so you can pay a tax to breathe. It's like Spaceballs, right? You remember that movie where they come with the big vacuum and suck up the whole planet's air, and people have air in cans? It's fresh air in a can. Is that going to be the future? I mean, they've already done it with water, and now no one makes food, really. It all comes in a plastic bag or a can or something. What do people do? Like, I myself can keep my family fed as long as the rest of the population doesn't figure out how to do the same things that I know how to do. And in which case, then there's going to be a shortage of food if anything happens, because everybody's a slave to the system in most places, especially inner city and urban areas.
Yeah, speaking of that, you said you mentioned the Jetsons there for a minute. That utopia that was guaranteed, that was in, the robotics movies, the new space travel in the 60s and 70s. I look at that era of cartoons and shows and programming for that generation. They're showing you the best that technology could be. Why? So you wouldn't resist the integration of electronics and robotics into daily life. Because if you would have seen what it would be like if every program, instead of having the Jetsons blazing around like, hey, George, well, I'll be back right back, I'm going to get the spaceship. And then all those other cool shows like Star Trek and everything running around. If every one of them would have been like the World Economic Forum enslaving everybody, as soon as anybody would have seen an electronic device come, they'd be like, get that thing away, throw it to the bottom of the sea. So the way they programmed in everybody during the Jetsons time was to be, wow, let's accept this. It'd be great if we had this kind of tech. This would be awesome. Definitely want to have it. So there was no resistance. Like, they built that into those generations coming up to this time. So there would be no resistance to the implementation of that. Digital enslavement, because the way they packaged it was like cool, awesome, fun, amazing, and our lives will be easier. So the resistance was removed just by the presentation of how it would be in the future. So I'm wondering right now, what are we seeing, or what are we being programmed with, so we won't resist the next implementation of said whatever? Again, it comes down to robotics, it comes down to the digital IDs, it comes down to biometrics and LiDAR scanning of your forests and saving the planet and all these things that don't have any children, don't eat meat, don't walk, don't cut a tree down. The world will end if you cut a tree and burn the firewood. Oh, no. Until you get on an airplane and you fly over and you realize how much vast empty space there really is. And you alluded to that as well. Oh, but I mean, you can't travel either. You need a digital, you got to have a carbon footprint. You'll only be able to travel once a year, and you'll only be able to go to 100 miles on an airplane, and then you got to get extra carbon credits to offset. Like, really, what are they trying to teach us now or program us with so we won't resist something? Because those little bits that I just mentioned about, oh, you won't be able to travel, okay, you won't be able to do this, okay. But what is the messaging of a non-resistance part of that into the next rollout of planned society? Because if you look back into the 1850s and 60s, you can clearly see that it's been planned for the rollout up to where we sit today, that nothing organically really arose out of that except the suppression of technologies that would have broken us free from a metered system or a metered life. You look back from 1850 into the Industrial Revolution, into the behemoths and the magnates and the monopolists of oil and pharmaceuticals and chemicals and electrical. And you see where we sit today. And at that point, then everything was planned. And anything that ever got in the way was suppressed or had gone into a prohibition type phase. And I wonder why, now with marijuana legalization, is it just to numb down a population? Because I'm really wondering, that Jetsons thing was so perfectly framed, so there would be no resistance to what we see carrying, computers around in our pockets as our own personal listening devices. So what's the next thing that, even though you think there's a lot of resistance, I'm just wondering, because, you and I, we're on the same mind frame. So when we see World Economic Forum, bad. When we see carbon credits coming, bad. Carbon footprint, bad. I'm not going to get a digital ID and a carbon footprint to be able to travel, bad. But how many other people are out there going, oh, man, this is going to be the greatest world, dude. It's going to be the greenest thing. This is epic, man. We can all be equal. Well, everything is money. I'm looking at how the world's being framed right now for the younger generation, so they won't resist what's coming by the shows and programs that are right now. So how do you see that in the future then, of the programming of the young minds for non-resistance moving forward? Because futile is resistance, my Borg friends.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at an article earlier talking about how they're perfecting the integration of, chips and organic cells together, which, I've talked about for a long time, that they're beginning to be the replacement builders or creators, or at least that's what they're attempting to do. And who knows? It's hard to keep track of each generation's fad and things, but it doesn't look good. I mean, in recent years, I'm sure you've seen all of the things from the little challenges that go around social media where kids will be like eating detergent or snorting condoms or all kinds of stuff like that. So, I don't really believe in Darwin evolution as it's put forth. However, if it was exactly a thing like that, which there's some aspect of that I agree with, that the kid that eats too many marbles doesn't grow up to have kids of their own, except for the fact that that's not what happened in recent times. We've been able to keep childhood diseases, which doesn't make any sense, in our gene pool from, somehow. So there's all these weird things going on that allow the top tier of things to monopolize everything. I mean, obviously what we're talking about is food, air, and now it's health, because the technocrats are moving into that field where they want to be the replacement creators of everything. And, I've been looking at, I keep up with sci-fi. That's my little guilty little pleasure of watching sci-fi movies when they come out. And it is so far in between where an original idea comes out that's not the same predictive programming of a dystopic future where we've destroyed our planet and AI runs everything. Everybody's got a robot or is interdependent on robots. We can't reproduce. Everybody's zoned off. There's super authoritarian rules about everything. And then now we're starting to see that in the real world. I mean, people around the world have been arrested for memes for opinions because they hurt feelings. Police show up at places and don't enforce law, but they enforce feelings. So you got the feelings police out there. And now they're setting precedent to make the feelings police legitimate and give them law enforcement authority to mess with people about even their ideas. So they've set us up for this thing. And not to, cite famous people like the Roman Empire and Nazi Germany, but people in those empires have said, they don't care what you think about things as long as we get the juveniles, the kids. If we get the kids, then we get the mothers because they will follow, and the mothers, if they follow, then the husbands will follow. And, further, if you destroy the entire nuclear family and you just get the kids, in 20 years, you now have the people that run a society or potentially could run a society. And that's exactly what they did. They brainwashed just one generation. Now, on the same kind of idea, think about mass migration, especially if you have some of the origins with philosophies of conquering and replacement, which, all you have to do is look into who's going where and what they believe. And you'll see that in 20 years, they will outproduce and therefore be the mainstream population of Western Europe. That's how it is, and that's where it's going.
Wow. Please remember to sign up for our show notes. That's oilseedcrops.org, MIAC radio show. Just go to oilseedcrops.org and then nav bar. MIAC radio show. We'll kick that off to you. 10 bullet points of what we spoke about tonight. And enjoy your private robot. Until we talk next week. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.